Okay, so this is the end of project phase 1 and the beginning of project phase 2. And as I shared with you in email, this is all getting put into solar, so we're not going to put in any irrigation there. So what we're going to do is we're going to move to the west, and this is all owned by the Mesa Casa Grande company. And so we'll just use this southwest quarter of our original field, which is owned by Mesa Casa Grande. And then we'll use all of these fields. And just one thing I was sharing with the students in class is one thing you were supposed to do last time is find the canals. And so you can see these canals. This one's not being cleaned out, but they're on the south side of all the fields in our current project. Um, so here's a canal on the south side of the field. And then if we look over here, you can see this canal, and I think this is a delivery canal to the other canals, or maybe to the next property. But you can see that the canals are here on the south side of the property. So if we look here, here's a canal on the south side of the field. And so then they're irrigating the border strips out of the canals. So all you really have to do is just draw a line on the south side of each field and say those are the canals. Okay. So today we are going to um, use the data that I provided for you in your Brightspace chapter 2 content. Okay, so to find that information, you go to content and then chapter 2, irrigation economics. And here's the project, phase 2 project requirements and information. And by the way, there's 11 parts of this project, and I was thinking it would take 38 hours. So I wouldn't expect you to spend more than 3 hours a week on this project. So, I mean, you could spend weeks doing this economic analysis, but I only want you to spend 3 or 4 hours on it. I don't want you to spend a really long time. So that's my goal. Okay, so if you open this Word doc, download it. Okay. So the second phase of the project is irrigation economics or engineering economics. And we're going to again focus on section 16 and then the southwest quarter of section 15 where we were. And so really you're not going to do too much with the farm. You're just going to be evaluating crops in general, irrigation systems in general. And so I'm just going to explain what you're going to do. So, so you're going to decide whether to put in new drip or pivot irrigation systems on this ground and whether it's worth it. And another thing you're going to think about, and I don't want you to spend a lot of time with this. I mean, you can just grow alfalfa if you want, is figure out which crops to grow in the crop rotation. So I've provided some information. And then I have an Excel spreadsheet associated with chapter 2. where you can plug the information in. But anyway, I'm going to go over the background data now. So I looked it up and it says that grandfathered water rights will allow you to, it says pump any depth of pumping required for crops. By that, I mean like 5 feet per year. And by any depth of pumping, what I mean is, any reasonable depth of pumping that's grandfathered in, okay? So what happened was when they established the Pinal AMA, the active management area, the state of Arizona did this in 1970. They let farmers continue pumping the amount of water they had been pumping, and then they said nobody else can add a new farm. And it looks like they've stopped delivering water by the Central Arizona Project, but it looks like the farms still have their grandfathered water rights. And I imagine that'll continue to be the case if they keep putting in solar farms, because that's going to decrease the load or the demand on the groundwater. So I think the farmers that keep their farms, I think they might be able to assume they can just keep irrigating as they have been irrigating. And as we saw in the map, it looks like all this ground is in alfalfa. So I would, and it's flood irrigated. So I think their grandfathered water rights are probably about 6 feet per year because that's how much flood irrigation is required to grow alfalfa. Okay. So I've listed the water requirements, yields, and profits for the typical crops in the region. I'll go through that. You're free to choose whatever crops you like, but remember we probably have a 3 or 4 hour limit, so you might just want to go with alfalfa. I listed all the crops just for fun, I guess. The thing that you need to be careful of is the watermelons and cantaloupes have a huge amount of potential profit, like 10,000 or $13,000 per acre per year. But there's also a very high risk. It costs a lot to grow them. You know, they transplant them, and just so many costs. And there's a risk of crop failure. And so that's something you should consider too. Otherwise, everybody would just grow watermelons. And it's also highly dependent on if you beat the market to the store. Like if you're there the first week before everybody else, you get like double the price. So there's a lot of risk associated with watermelons and cantaloupes. I listed the labor costs for surface irrigation. The rule of thumb I used to have, based on what a farmer told me, was it was $25,000 to irrigate 100 acres per year. Basically, you needed one irrigator for 100 acres per 100 acres, and they would get paid $25,000. But I think it's probably 35,000 now or something. So you can do it that way, or they have some costs like per acre foot that's delivered.
30, you're estimating $3,500 to irrigate 100?
No, 30, it takes one irrigator to irrigate 100 acres. Like he's full, somebody who goes around and moves pipes and puts water on fields and sits there in their car and watches the water go down the field and then turns it off. So one person, I'll just complete the story. There is a farmer down near Wilcox who had 400 acres. And he worked 13 hours a day. And he had 4 irrigators that he paid $25,000 each. Then he put in center pivots. He didn't need any of the irrigators anymore. And he only had to work 6 hours a day and he played golf the rest of the time. So in our analysis, I said it's going to cost money to irrigate by flood, but just assume the irrigation cost is 0 for drip and pivot. Drip pit takes more work because it's much more it needs more maintenance. But I think we're just going to assume there's no labor because drip is also irrigated by an automatic timer. So like you can drive around in your truck and you can use telemetry to schedule your center pivot irrigation system. You could schedule your center pivot irrigation system from the golf course. And so that's why we're just gonna assume there's labor costs for drip, for surface irrigation, but no labor costs for drip and center pivot. Okay. So I'd like you to make a table to show your planned crop rotations. This is the requirements now. If you're just gonna grow alfalfa all the time, I think there's a limit. Like normally you can only keep your alfalfa in for 3 years. But I, as far as I'm concerned, you can just grow alfalfa continuously if you want to. Okay,
So if we did that, then we should, you'll have to make like a table.
I guess so, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But I think in the example from the book, and also as there's a spreadsheet, I think it already has a rotation with alfalfa and then a few other things. So you can just use that too if you want and just apply the numbers. It's probably a little more interesting to go alfalfa 3 years, cotton 3 years. And then with cotton, you'll have a winter crop like I don't know what, maybe cantaloupes. I can't remember if you can, it matters like when you can fit the crop in, as far as when the cotton season is, if you're going cotton. Okay, and like I said, there's some risk with watermelons and cantaloupes. Oh yeah. Okay, make a table showing your planned crop rotation, discuss this with respect to fields on the property. Make a paragraph and table listing your cost assumptions and rationale for the economic analysis. Add the Excel graph and spreadsheet. So I'll show you how to use that. And show the fields, wells, and associated flow rates. So one thing I'd like you to do is, because we're not on canal water anymore, the student who told me about the solar, she looked up the wells and it's listing the well flow rates. So you can add up all the well flow rates and see how much flow rate you have to see if you have enough flow rate for your plans. But don't plan on any water from irrigation districts. The student who told me that we needed to switch fields, she said this field is in the San Carlos district, which I'm kind of surprised by, but maybe it is. And I think San Carlos is still getting water from like this some river or something, so I'm not sure. But if you can prove that, if you want to take the time, you can use canal water. Otherwise, just use your well water. Okay, so the parameters we're going to use in the analysis are the capital cost of the irrigation system. And I spent time, several hours today and maybe yesterday, looking up costs. So I have all the costs for you. Labor cost, energy cost, water use, and there's a water cost. But actually the energy cost and the water cost are mixed together if you're pumping from a well. Because it's the energy cost to pump the water from the well that you're paying for. And then your crop yield, and by that I mean the crop price and how much you're getting for the crop. In the spreadsheet that I'm going to provide for you, we're doing a 20-year economic analysis, but in the example in this chapter or in this document, it's a 10-year economic analysis, but you can choose whatever you want. I looked up the rate of return, the required rate of return for irrigation improvements, and that's 6 to 8%. So we're just going to go with 7% as the required rate of return. It looks like the crop prices, and not all crops are the same, but I included it in the document. It looks like they're going to increase by about 3% per year. And then the costs, it looks like they're going to go up by 5% per year, like energy cost, water cost, labor costs. So those are the numbers we're going to use. And here's the price of energy. And in Arizona, we have very cheap energy. Probably mostly because of the Palo Verde nuclear power plant. But you know, like in California, they're trying, it's like 48 cents a kilowatt hour. In Arizona, it's like 12. So so that's the cost per kilowatt hour. And there's an equation in chapter 2 that allows you to calculate the cost of pumping for a given head. And you have questions on that, so you'll learn how to do it for a given head, given price of energy, and so on. Do you guys need any clarification on what a kilowatt hour is and cost per kilowatt hour? Pretty, okay, pretty straightforward. And I don't think we're gonna, you could use diesel or natural gas for your pump if you want to. I think most of these guys are on electric power. Yes?
So there's Arizona Power, whatever, APS.
Oh, yeah.
costs. And then there's, San Carlos Irrigation.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
whatever, Irrigation Power,
Yeah.
like, do we choose one of those or?
Well, I would just go with 12 cents a kilowatt hour. But, you know, like even at your house now, somebody was showing me, you can choose a rate structure where if you're not using electricity at your house from between the hours of 3 and 7, you're paying 6.5 cents when you combine your delivery charge with your electric charge. But you're paying, if between 3 and 7, it's like up in the 15 cents range, right? It's a ridiculous amount. So, well, it's ridiculous in Arizona. It's not, it'd be very cheap in California. So anyway, you can, I would just go with 12 cents a kilowatt hour for the project. All right. But I'm going to show you that you probably don't even need to do that energy. You can just think about water cost. Although it would be interesting to see, like, what is the water cost if my wells are 100 feet? So you need to know your water depth. We already showed last time that the water depth for the wells on section 15 are 100 feet. So I think you can just assume that your water depth's 100 feet on this property, although you could look up the wells there. But the this is all from AI. And I forgot to say this is from AI. But, huh?
It says it at the top. It says Microsoft. Co.
Oh, yeah. So everything in here is from AI. So they give you a sample calculation. 10 cents a kilowatt hour is $50 to $55 per acre foot. That's not bad. So lift is 200 feet. And the way we think about that is your water table is 100 feet down. Then maybe add 10 more feet for drawdown, 110 feet. And then for our center pivot, we probably need 90 feet of pressure. So the total pressure required for the pump is 200 feet. Okay, so you add the lift and then the pressure you need to pressurize the water to. For drip, it's going to be a little higher. You'd think that drip was low pressure and pivots were high pressure, but it's kind of the opposite because with drip, you have to go through all the sand filtration. So that adds a lot of pressure. And you also need some extra for back flushing or something. So drip energy is not cheap. Okay. And actually, they have this conversion at 10 cents per kilowatt hour is $50 to $55 per acre foot. I have equations in the text that you can calculate directly, with equations. But you might just want to use this rule of thumb. I mean, this looks good enough. So your water price will be 0, I think, if you're just pumping it out of the ground. all you have is energy cost, or you could think of it the other way, all you have is water cost, and that's the price of energy to pump it. Okay, I found all of these, I just used Copilot. And I found all these irrigation depths. So this would be per year. So if it's flood irrigation, the alfalfa, you're going to use 72 inches of water or 6 feet. If it's pivots, you're going to use about 3.5 feet of water per year.
That's all per year.
Per year. This is all per year. Seasonal. Well, alfalfa grows year round. And then for both of them, the yield is 8.5 tons an acre. And the price is $200 a ton. A couple years ago, it was $400 a ton, but it's gone down to $200 a ton. Probably because everybody put in alfalfa. I'd imagine. Because it was so expensive. So if it's $200 a ton, that means you make $1,700 an acre in for selling it. And then cotton, the pivot and the flood aren't too much different for cotton. And this is how much you get. And so you multiply that times 63 cents a pound. And then the federal government pays you to grow cotton. There's all sorts of different subsidies, but maybe we'll just assume it's this $85 an acre subsidy. Then here's almonds. So listing a depth of application for the different crops. Watermelons, $10,000 to $13,000 an acre on watermelons if you hit it right. But it takes a lot of skill. There's a lot of risk. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. I think it's mostly a winter crop. I'm not sure, but it hardly uses any water. 2.2 feet on flood, 1.3 feet on drip. And I thought you couldn't irrigate any vegetables with center pivots, but I looked it up and you can use center pivots to irrigate waters and cantaloupes. I think you used the one reason you don't irrigate vegetables with sprinklers is you can transfer disease to the crops. And so there's been very bad outbreaks and people dying due to contamination of crops. So they're very careful with the rules. But I was thinking with the watermelons and cantaloupes, maybe it doesn't matter so much because it's got a rind over it. But anyway, I looked it up and it said you can irrigate watermelons and cantaloupes with pivots. So if you want to do that you can. I imagine the depth will be the same as the drip for the watermelons and cantaloupes.
And people don't wash their produce that they get. Look at the grocery store. It's crazy. Kids. Yeah.
Why wash your produce?
Everybody should. Crazy.
Yeah, I won't say what I do.
You do.
I won't say.
I work at Sprouts in the produce department on the weekends.
Oh,
There's no way in hell I would not wash everything.
that's okay. I'm gonna start washing my vegetables. Okay, so here's some other crops that are usually in rotations, but I didn't look up the prices. But if you want to use oats, barley, wheat, or sorghum, you can look it up. Okay, and so here's the cost per acre foot, $50 to $70 an acre foot from cap water, but we don't have that anymore. Here's what they say is the on-farm cost for Pinal County, $90 to $150 an acre foot. So they're including operation and maintenance, pumping and assessments. So it's not just the $55, I guess. Oh, and groundwater pumping, they're saying $120 to $200 an acre foot. Varies by lift depth and energy rates. I'm surprised it's a little higher than what we calculated before. But anyway. Okay, and then the inflation, it's going to go up about 5% a year. Bless you. And these are the grandfathered water rights. I don't understand this really. But I think if you have flood irrigated alfalfa, you can assume that you could get 6 acre feet per year. I don't understand this completely, but okay. So what we're doing is we're comparing surface irrigation to putting in a pivot or putting in drip irrigation. And so this is why so many people are putting in pivots. $700 an acre for the pivot. 1,400 to 2,200 or even more for the drip. So it costs a lot more to put in the drip. It's a lot harder to maintain. Its lifespan is shorter. 7 to 10% of capital for the drip. I think that's per year. Yeah. 1 to 2% of capital for the pivot.
When you say pivot, you're talking about those like overhead,
The center pivots that go around in circles.
they like are like sprinklers kind of hanging down.
Well, there's sprinklers on top, but not in Arizona. We hang these bubblers down or
Like
little
down to this.
right above the surface. Yeah. If the problem in Arizona with the overhead sprinklers is 50% of the water evaporates before it even reaches the soil. So so that they were very unpopular in Arizona until they invented these drop tubes. And now they're very popular. So here's your 10-year total CapEx. Drip is $2,400 to $4,200 an acre. Pivots are $840 to $940. The water use efficiency on pivots is pretty high, especially these drop tubes. And it's high on drip. You know, it's only like 60 or 70% on flood. There's no residual value on a drip system, but you can actually sell your pivot after 15 years for $350 an acre. Not bad. So it seems like a rather easy choice what to get. And actually, drip is popular on like tree crops and vineyards. It's not very popular. This subsurface drip that they talk about for field agriculture, is everybody talks about it, but there's hardly any in the ground. All the drip that's been put in has been on like almonds and vineyards, where it really works well, other tree crops. Okay. So here's just a sample economic analysis from AI for the drip and the pivots. So they went through the capital, the annual cash flow summary. So here's the cash flow. And you can see year to year, this is for alfalfa. Your cash flow is almost the same for drip and pivots, but you have this much higher capital expense for the drip. But in relation to all the money coming in, it's not that high. You know, they say it's a 3-year payback period on the drip and maybe 1.5 year on the pivot. So, but in your economic analysis, what you're comparing is not the drip to nothing. You're comparing the drip to the flood. So what's your increased yield due to drip? Not just what's your yield due to drip. Okay, and I talk about that in the chapter. Okay, so there's just more stuff. Here's the labor for surface irrigation. They're saying $8 to $15 an acre foot. So an acre foot is 1 acre, 1 foot deep. So if you have a 50-acre field and you apply 1 foot, then it would be 50 times 10 or $500. 1 foot depth of water to a 50-acre field, $500. Okay. I wanted to go through the risks on the watermelon on alfalfa. So I just asked it to put in that.
And there is risk. Anyway, that's the main point. It costs a lot to put the watermelons in the field. You know, you have this very expensive drip system too. You configure your drip system differently for the watermelons. So
Do farmers take like crop insurance? Is that one?
I don't think they have crop insurance for watermelons. They might. I know there is crop insurance. And the federal government has some deal where if you lose your money, then you get paid by the federal government, you know. I don't know much about that. Okay, I asked it to look at the inflation rate. So here's inflation rates for specific types of crops like alfalfa, cotton grains going up 2.5 to 3.5%. Specialty crops, melons, vegetables going up 3 to 4% a year. Okay, and here's water allocation cuts. You know, if the groundwater starts going down, they could say don't pump. They have the state owns the groundwater. And they can say don't pump the groundwater anymore. It's their water. Farmers don't own it. That might sound bad, like it's what do you call it when the state has too much control? Can't remember.
Authoritarian.
Authoritarianism. But if they don't do that, then any farmer can pump any amount and the groundwater can just go to zero. That's why they took control, legally took control of all the groundwater and all the surface water. Okay, here's just the rate of return for different investments in farming. And so, for example, pivots, the rate of return is 6 to 8%. But and so that's why we're using 7%. For higher risk crops, they want a higher rate of return, 8 to 12%. So yeah, that's it. Okay, let me pause the video. All right, so I just downloaded my spreadsheet and there's a little trick. When you download spreadsheets onto your computer, it doesn't like them if there's any Visual Basic. Visual Basic used to be the language of Excel. Now I think it's Python. So before you open it, you have to right click on the file, go to Properties, and click Unblock any programs on the file. If you try to open it before you do that, it won't let you do it. You have to download it again. Okay. Now I can open it. So I have it here in downloads and now I can double click on it. Okay, so now I have to enable the content, which means the macros. And now I'm going to here's my cash flow diagram. So what I've done here is I have a crop rotation between alfalfa and cotton. So I have sorghum, the first wheat and sorghum, the first year. Does anybody know why? Why would you do wheat and sorghum the first year?
Oh, yeah, I have a question.
Yes,
This was the chapter 2 irrigation economics one, right?
yes,
Oh, wait, okay, never mind. I see it. I see what I'm doing.
okay. So I have a Visual Basic program that allows you to hide the chart. Hide the chart, view the chart. Okay. This would be a new field where it's salty. Desert soils are salty naturally, so you have to leach the salt out, and wheat and sorghum are salt tolerant. So So you can see my crop rotation is 3 years of alfalfa, and then I have wheat, cotton. You might want to use the same crop rotation, you know? And so you wouldn't even have to change the spreadsheet, just have to change the numbers. We have some new numbers in there. So here's our required rate of return. And we decided we're going to use 7%, right? Okay. And so what's in all these cells is reference to this is the change per year, okay? And so in all these cells, there's calculations based on converting present value to future value, right? And so that's the rate of return or the change per year to the power of the year. See how it's going over here to the year? So it's just 1 plus 0.09 to the third. So that's how these cells work. And we decided the water cost is going to go up $500 a year or 5% a year, right? So we're going to change that to 0.05. And we decided the energy cost is going to go up by 5% a year. I think we decided the labor cost is going to go up by 5% a year. And I think we decided our crop prices are going up 3% a year. And I think this is per hectare. So a hectare is like 2 acres. So let's just double our acre values. A hectare is like 2.2 acres, but we'll just double our acre values. So how much profit did we make off alfalfa? I think it was $1,700 a year for the acres. So for the hectare, I think it would be like 3,400. Okay. And for our we didn't get a value for wheat or sorghum. So, and that would be for the whole year, for the whole rotation. But let's just say it's $1,000 for wheat, cotton in crop price. Okay. And then our water cost, our dollars per hectare, did we decide it was $100 or $200 per acre? I'm thinking $100 an acre. So $200 a hectare is a reasonable cost. And really, the energy is zero, right? Because the energy is going into our water cost. And actually, I think they said it was more like 110. So let's say it's $230 a hectare. Okay. And then our labor cost, dollars per hectare per year. Let's see. I'm just going to go back to that number I had before. Let's say it's $35,000 for 100 acres. So it's $70,000 for 100 hectares. So what would that be in dollars per hectare? It'd be equals 70,000. I'm getting $700. just for today, let's say the labor cost is, um, well, if you're doing it for, this is B for our surface irrigation system, right? Okay, anyway, that's something you can struggle with. I'm gonna say it's $500 per hectare for our labor cost. Okay. But actually, we decided for drip, it was 0. So we have to leave at quarter till, right? Is that when this class ends? Yeah,
So in 5 minutes.
okay,
Yeah.
5 minutes. Okay, so let's just say we're doing our drip now and we're assuming the labor's 0. And then I think for our drip system, didn't we say it was like $2,000 an acre? So it's gonna be more like 4,000 now instead of 2,500. And I'm saying the system has to be replaced every 5 years here. You know, not the whole system, but you have to pull in new drip tape because it's gonna wear out. So I have a cost there.
So you replace the 2,500 with the 4,000.
Yeah. And I'm just playing around here. You guys, you can refine it, you know, as you want. But this would be the total crop benefit. And I suppose what I should do is I should have a higher, let's say this is the drip. Well, I guess if I'm not, if I'm gonna compare the drip to the flood and the pivot, I'll just do everything for each system. I've got the total yield profit, got the total energy cost, and so on. So let's just say this is the drip, $4,000 a hectare. And I'm replacing, let's just say I'm putting in $600. Everything's more expensive now. So every 5 years, it's gonna cost me $600 a hectare to put in more drip lines. Okay. I've got my water cost, energy cost, basically no labor. I've got all these done. And so here's the net present value. It's $7,281. When you do engineering economic analysis, if your net present, if you've already put in your required rate of return, right? So when you do engineering economic analysis, your project is a go if your net present value is greater than 0. So according to this, we should go ahead with our drip system. All right.
Wait, what'd you say? Can you repeat that?
According to engineering economic analysis, the project is a go if it's greater than 0. Like if this was $1 at my required rate of return, our net present value. So what's happened here is all these values have been converted back to present value. See, here's the present value in this column. So here is their value in the future, but then I'm converting them all back to present value based on the required rate of return. So this number here is just adding up these present values. All right. You can see the present value is like 782 here, whereas it's 958. Out here, the present value is 341 when the actual value is 1,077. Because money in 17 years is not worth as much. Money that you're going to get in 17 years is not worth very much. Because you could have invested that money in the bank and got interest all those 17 years. So that's why there's a required rate of return. You're only going to do the project if it's going to make you money based on what you normally do with your money. Okay, so, and then if I was gonna do the drip, maybe now I would add in -500. I would increase my water cost, although I have to consider energy too. So maybe -300, because I'm gonna use more water.
So we choose if we want to be careful.
Well, I think what you should do is do this for drip, for center pivot and flood, and see what gives you the highest net present value. You have no investment cost for drip, I mean flood. So this is 0.
There's no canal maintenance or anything like that.
Well, there might be, but we're bumping our labor up for the drip. And we're not gonna get as high a yield. So let's cut our yields. Actually, flood is just as much yield on some crops like alfalfa. So we'll keep our alfalfa yield at 3,400 for the flood. Okay, so maybe our yields are the same. But look, our net present value is only 2,800 now. Not as high. Still worth doing, but not as high as the drip.
What is the net present, like, what do those words actually mean?
Okay, net present value means you're subtracting all your annual costs from your capital. You're subtracting all your costs discounted to the present value. So you're adding all your costs discounted to the present value to your capital investment in year 0. So that's present value. So these are all discounted. This is not discounted because it's right now investing. And your and then your benefits are also discounted back to the present value. So if you're getting $1,000 in 17 years from selling cotton, that's only worth $300 or $200 today. And let's just make our net present value higher. So look at this number and this number, 338 and 258. If we make our required rate of return double, okay, watch these numbers when I hit return. Now 338 is only worth $200 because I have a higher required rate of return. So that money coming in 3 years or 4 years is not worth as much as it was when I had a lower required rate of return. It's discounted more. Just like you get more interest if you have a higher interest rate on your money in the bank, it's the same thing. So what we do in order to make a level playing field is we discount everything back to the present value.
So the required rate of return is like, kind of like a comparison? I guess?
Yeah, like, let's say I'm a farmer and
Like, for instance, the current interest rates would be a good required rate of return.
well, you notice that they had different required rates of return for different farm investments. I showed you that on that document. And for a pivot, they said the required rate of return is 6 to 8%. So I just chose 7%. But an easier way to think about it is if I can just get a CD at the bank for 5%, I can just invest my money in the bank, get a sure CD, and I get 5%, then I'm not going to invest anything on my farm where I'm getting less than 5%. Or let's say I invest in the stock market and I assume I get 8% a year. I'm not going to go to all the work of putting in an irrigation system if I'm getting less than I can just get in the stock market by doing nothing. So that's the rationale. You set your required rate of return based on what else you could be doing with your money. But also due to risk. You know, they had different required rates of return for higher required rates of return for riskier investments. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.